Hey designers, this is Kristen from Cut File Classroom, where I teach you how to design and sell SVG cut files for Cricut, Silhouette, and other cutting machines. In this video, I'll show you how to create a simple pencil SVG file. With back to school coming up for some parts of the country and just around the corner for the rest, there are so many crafts that can be made using these cute pencils. As you can see here, I was able to make several different cut files starting from a single pencil outline. Each of these pencils can actually be cut and layered from different material. So this one is ideal for vinyl or HTV. These two could be used for vinyl, HTV, or cut from cardstock. And this one is more suited for layering with cardstock, but could technically be used for vinyl as well. And even this one, which is our original pencil outline, could be used as a single line draw file, which is what we would use with a pen in our Cricut machine to draw designs instead of cutting. If you want to follow along, I'll put the link below where you can download the free Illustrator practice file, which includes these finished designs, the color palette, and a few of the working stages along the way. First, I'm going to select these designs and move them over to the side so I have room on my artboard. Then I'm going to press the M key, as in Mary, on my keyboard to bring up the rectangle tool, and then I'm just going to click and drag to draw a rectangle about the size that I want my pencil to be. Then I'm going to increase the stroke width and make it a little thicker. So I'm going to try about 7-point stroke weight. Right now by default, I have a fill color of white with a black stroke line, and I'm going to come over to my swatches panel, make sure that the fill color is selected, and I'm going to choose the none box right here because I just want to work with outlines right now. So all I have right now is a black stroke and no fill. So next, I'm actually going to press the P key and bring up the pen tool. And I actually have smart guides turned on right now. So if you don't have them, you want to come up to view and make sure that smart guides is checked. And then again, press P to bring up your pen tool. And once you have your pen tool selected, you can hover over this bottom path, and we can see it says path until I get to the center, and then it says intersect, and I have this guideline that tells me I'm going to make a point right at the center of this rectangle. So I'm just going to click to make an anchor point, and now I'm going to use the direct selection tool, which is the white arrow up here in the toolbar, and I'm just going to click that anchor point I created and drag down. And I'm going to press shift to make sure that I'm dragging directly down so my point doesn't get off center. So I think about there is good. And then I'm going to use the direct selection tool still to click and drag to select these top two anchor points. And when they're selected, we can see these little corner widgets appear. And I'm just going to click and drag on one of them. And since I had both anchor points selected, they're both going to change shape at the same time. And as I drag, now these corners are becoming rounded. So this is going to be the eraser end of my pencil. So once I get those corners softened just a little bit, I'm going to let go. And next I'm going to use the line tool, which is the backslash key on your keyboard, or this line segment tool over here in the toolbar. So once you have that selected, I'm going to draw a few straight lines going across my pencil. And I'm going to start with where the eraser ends. And as I'm making my lines, I'm just going to be very careful to make sure that the ends of my lines are lining up with the paths I have here. So with the line segment tool, I'm just going to click and drag, and I'm going to hold shift to make sure that my line stays perfectly straight. And I'm just going to come over to the other side and make sure that I have a nice straight line that doesn't extend past the end or fall short of meeting this path here. So I can actually do that a couple more times to create more lines on my pencil. So this would be where the metal, that metal part that holds the eraser is. And then I'm going to draw another line down at the bottom corner of the pencil. And then I'm going to draw one more line down here for the point. Now, in order to give this a little bit of a curved look, I'm going to press Shift C on my keyboard, and that's going to give me the anchor point tool, which is also located here underneath the pen tool in the toolbar. And I'm actually just going to click and drag up a little on that last line and that's going to give our point just a little bit of a curve, which I think is a nice touch versus having it just be a straight line. And then for this line, usually where you sharpen a pencil, you would have those zigzag lines here. So to create those, I'm going to come up to Effect, Distort and Transform, Zigzag. And we can see that our path has become zigzag, and in the zigzag options window, we can adjust how this zigzag is going to look. For ridges per segment, it says 4, so we can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4 points right now, but I kind of want this to be a little more symmetrical, so I'm going to bump it up to 5. And I'm just going to click over here to see that take effect. And so now we have 3 complete points here on our zigzag. And I actually like that. If you wanted to undersize here, if you want to make your zigzags more steep, let's say I'll do 0.25. You see how they become more steep and angled. And then if I use a lower number, it lessens them so they're less angled. So once you get those zigzags to a point where you like them, you can click OK. And you could leave this the way it is, but I actually want these bottom points to meet up with these side corners of my pencil. So right now I'm using the selection tool, which is the V as in Victor key on your keyboard. And I'm just going to click that path and just slide it up a little bit. And when we're dealing with cut files, you can't use any live effects. So I'm actually going to go ahead and expand this effect right now so that I can work with these points individually. So I'm going to come up to Object, Expand Appearance, and now our zigzag path has been turned into individual points that I can grab and edit. And then I'm going to press A on my keyboard to bring up the Direct Selection tool. And I'm going to click on this end anchor point, and I'm going to hold Shift and click on the other end anchor point, and I'm going to press Delete to remove them. And then I'm going to press the V key on my keyboard, and that gives me a bounding box around this path. And I'm going to press Alt or Option if you're Mac or Windows as I click and drag on this side handle until those endpoints meet the side of my pencil. As I made this path bigger, you might have noticed that the stroke also got thicker. That's because I have scale strokes and effects on, which I'll show you how to fix in a little bit. Right now, it's not a big deal. Okay, and now I can draw the vertical lines that run up and down the pencil. So again, I'm going to grab the line segment tool by pressing the backslash on my keyboard, and then I'm going to make sure that my mouse is lined up with this anchor point here, and I'm going to click and drag upward, and I'm going to make sure that I'm holding Shift as I drag to keep my line nice and straight. And then once I hit this top line, I'm going to let go, and then I'm going to come over to this anchor point and do the same thing. Click and drag while holding Shift, and then when I hit this top line, I'll let go. So that's pretty much it for our pencil outline. And then as promised, I'm just going to click and drag to select this whole thing so we can bring all of our stroke weights back to the same thing, which I think we had at 6 point. So now we have the same weight for our entire pencil. And if you want to play with the length of this, you could actually click and drag to select about either the top half of the pencil or the bottom half of the pencil. And then once you have half of it selected, you can click and drag up while holding Shift. And then, that way you can easily shorten or lengthen the pencil. Make sure you hold Shift so it doesn't go crooked on you like that. And then once you have it to a height that you like, you can let go. So I'm happy with that height. And now we can go ahead and create the different cut file versions of this pencil. So I always like to save the outlined version of a design over to the side, just in case I need to come back to it and make any changes. It just kind of makes things easier to have the actual path outlines to work from. So working from this outline, I'm going to make a version of a cut file that could be used for vinyl, HTV, or even cardstock. And what I need to do for that is I need to expand all of these paths. And first, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so you can see what's actually going to happen here. So right now we have all these vector paths that we drew to create our pencil shape, but we couldn't actually use this outline in a cutting machine the way that it is. It would just slice a whole bunch of random shapes into your material. So in order to use this pencil outline as a cutting file, we need to expand these paths. So to do that, I'm going to come up to Object, Path, Outline, Stroke. And as we can see, that has created a whole bunch of like rectangles from those paths. So even like this, we couldn't use it as a cut file just yet because all these areas where the lines overlap would all be cut individually from material on your cutting mat, and it would just make a big mess. So the next thing we need to do is come to the Pathfinder panel and choose Unite. And that's going to weld or combine all of those shapes into a single vector shape. So now if I switch to outline mode, which is Command or Control Y, now we can see that we have an actual vector shape that could be cut from vinyl or HTV or even cardstock. So here is one version of our pencil cut file, and then I'm going to use this as a starting point for the next version of the cut file. Okay, and actually notice that I had a little bit of this path here that's sticking out. So I'm actually going to zoom in and I'm going to use the direct selection tool to select that anchor point. And then I'm going to use the pen tool. And when I hover over the anchor point, I get this little minus sign that allows me to click and subtract those extra points. Okay, there we go. So now I have a nice clean pencil shape, and so now I can create another cut file, and I'm going to use this design as my starting point. So I'm going to press Alt or Option on my keyboard, depending if you have a Mac or Windows. And I'm just going to drag. So I'm pressing Alt and dragging to create a copy of that shape. And this is actually an example of a compound shape, which is multiple shapes combined together to make a new shape. So this is a rectangle shape, this is a rectangle shape, this is like a, partial rectangle shape. Here's our like triangle shape. So these are all different shapes that are kind of fused together to form this pencil. So what I'm going to do to make the next version of this cut file is I'm actually going to pull out all of those inner shapes. So to do that, I have the full design selected, and then I'm going to grab the group selection tool, which is over here. It's the white arrow with the plus sign next to it, and it's hiding under the direct selection tool. Let me zoom in so you can see here. So I'm going to use the group selection tool, and I'm going to press Shift, and I'm going to click on just that outer path of this shape to deselect it. So now I only have these inner shapes selected, and let me zoom back out. And I'm going to press Command or Control X on my keyboard, and that pulls all of those inner shapes out of that path. So now I just have this like silhouette of the pencil. And then I'm going to press Command or Control F for paste in front. So that now all of those subtracted shapes are pasted in front. And then I'm going to press Control or Command G to group those. You could also right click and choose group. So now that I have these shapes as a group, I can double click them to work inside of the group. So now that these shapes are selected, I can apply different colors to them. So I already have my colors saved over here in the swatches panel, or if you're doing this along with me, you could also pull from the color palette over here, and you can either use the group selection tool or the direct selection tool to click on the shapes and apply a fill color. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And I'm gonna leave the point black. And when we're making cut files, we want to make sure that all of the same colored areas are made into compound paths. So I'm going to select all of the yellow shapes. I'm going to choose Command or Control 8 to make those a compound path. You could also come up to Object, Compound Path, Make. And I'm going to do the same thing with the gray colors, select them all, and then choose Command or Control 8. That way these will stay together on the mat when you go to cut them in Cricut Design Space. And we can see that this blue highlight at the top, which means that we're working inside of a group right now, which is called isolation mode. So to get out of this, I'm just going to double click and that's going to exit isolation mode. And now we have our second version of this cut file. So if I click and drag, we can see the colored shapes could be layered on top of a black base, and that makes it easy to layer in vinyl. And then the third cut file, I'm actually just going to click on this top group and press Alt and drag to make a copy. And that gives me the third version of the cut file, which this is just another way that some people like to layer designs where there is no backing piece and the white empty spaces just kind of show through. It's just a little more forgiving for people that are just learning how to layer vinyl. And then for the final version that's going to be ideal to layer from cardstock, I'm going to come back to my original outline of the pencil and I'm going to press Alt or Option and drag it over here to make a copy. And I'm actually going to get rid of a few of these detailed lines just to make it a bit easier to show you how to design something that would be layered from paper or cardstock. So for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to delete those lines and we're just going to work with these basic shapes for our pencil. So I'm actually going to click and select the outline path, and I'm using the group selection tool. If you are using the direct selection tool, you could click to select the shape and then press Alt or Option and click again, and that'll select the whole path for you. And then I'm going to press Shift X on my keyboard, and that swaps the stroke and the fill. So instead of having a black stroke and no fill, now I have a black fill with no stroke. And I'm going to change this fill color to the peach color. And this is going to serve as the base layer for my cardstock design. When you are layering pieces of paper, it's called paper piecing. When you are layering paper piecing projects with cardstock, it's always helpful to have a base layer that you can build all the rest of your paper layers on top of. So this is going to be my base layer. And then I'm just going to actually make sure that this point here extends a little bit past the shape. So in this case, we want this path to extend a little bit past this edge. And we already have it extending over here. And the same over here. This is extending a little bit past, which is good. And now I can select the whole thing and come to the Pathfinder panel and click Divide. And that's going to use those black lines, and it kind of cuts them into that base layer that we had. So if I click on this, now this is a separate shape, this is a separate shape, this is a separate shape. Each of these are separate shapes. So I'm going to go ahead and give those colors. And you might be thinking, oh, but you destroyed your base layer. Yes, I did, but we're going to get that back in just a second. So to recreate a base layer that all these pieces can be stacked on, I'm going to select everything with the selection tool, and I'm going to copy, so Command or Control C, and then I'm going to paste. And I'm actually going to paste this in front so you can see what's happening, but you could also paste it in back if you're a little more advanced in Illustrator. So I'm going to do Command or Control F, which is paste in front. So now we have two copies layered right on top of each other. And I'm going to come to Pathfinder and click Unite. And that's going to combine all those shapes into a single shape. So now this is going to be my base layer, and I'm going to make it peach again. And now I'm going to send it to the back so that it's in the bottom. And to do that, I'm going to right click and choose Arrange, Send to Back. And now it's behind the other shapes, and I actually don't need this peach piece here anymore. And then the rest of these shapes can easily be glued on top of this base layer in cardstock. So I'm just going to group that. This is already grouped. Let me group this one. And now we have all the different versions of our pencil, including, like I said, including this single line version, which now I can fix this little edge here. So something like this would be called a single line SVG or a draw SVG, and this is what you would use to have a pen tool or a sketch pen that you would put into your Cricut or Silhouette machine, and it would draw out these lines instead of cutting. And a lot of people use those for cards and foil quill and different types of things like that. So now all these pencil designs are finished and they can be saved out as SVG files. I wouldn't recommend including every single version here in one SVG file, depending on your customer, depending on the kind of project you're creating. You might want to save these out separately, depending on the end material that they're designed for, but these are all ready to go into a cutting machine right now. So that's a wrap for today. If you'd like to learn more about designing SVG files for cutting machines, head over to cutfileclassroom.com and download my free designer's guide to error-free SVGs. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe, and feel free to drop any questions in the comments below, and let me know what you'd like to see in my next video. See you next time.